If you have a question that you would like to have considered for an upcoming video, you can send it to me at thegreatlovestoryofyourlife@gmail.com. Now, this is not an attempt to provide 5-minute therapy, but rather to give you some perspectives for you to consider as you look at changes in your life. Good afternoon. Today I'd like to address a message that was sent by a fine young man who had some questions about how to improve his life. So I'd like to read that today. It's rather lengthy, so to give it some perspective, I'm going to read it quickly, and then we'll talk about some of the points that stuck out for me. And even though it's a question that a young man had, I think these points that we talk about can be of value to you too, as you look for ways to improve your life. So let's read the message and then we'll get to it. I'll read it quickly. The title of it is, "I'm stuck and I don't know what else to do." I'm stuck and I feel as though I have been for quite a while. I've been to counseling. I know various types of therapists personally, but still there are things I want to see change in my life that are not changing, despite trying to put them right. It's strange because it comes at a time where on the surface I'm doing fairly well. I've landed an internship at a highly regarded international engineering company. I'm studying a degree which is very well regarded at a high-end institution with fairly good grades, all things considered. I'm part of different projects where I'm asked to be project leader and hold a project management role for another. I exercise regularly. I started doing more weight stuff. I speak 2 languages and I'm a fairly good problem solver. I read books and listen to even more audiobooks. I enjoy doing all these things. However, it feels as though I'm not living these things. As if they're happening, but I don't realize what it is I'm doing. I'm not taking it fully in. So this is me stating things I've done to work on myself, things that you might think would result in improving self-esteem. I often see advice along the lines of do something you can excel at, meaning you'll gain some sort of self-confidence and self-esteem, but I'm not seeing that happen. When I'm at the university, I speak to everyone. People perceive me as being super social, but when it comes from an anxious place of not wanting to be unfriendly with anyone. People say, "I don't know how you do it." The catch is, I can be super social in a place where people are acquaintances, but I can't seem to get beyond that and form meaningful relationships, both romantic and non-romantic. I don't do dates or dating apps. I've realized that socializing around alcohol is not for me. This is because I've noticed that in situations where people are drinking in, I'm the complete opposite. I have no idea why. I get anxious and often don't know what to say. I'm interested in talking about meaningful things, and that can come across as too much when people want lighthearted and funny conversations. I know I have a low self-esteem, low self-image, and I want to get rid of it, but it seems that I'm doing a lot of work on it and no results are coming from it. I've never really fit into social circles. I've never really enjoyed typical things people my age enjoy, such as clubbing and all that. I love going to raves though, and I've managed to befriend some people through that, but they live far away from me, like 5 hours. I feel as though I've developed this persona where if a problem presents itself, I want to solve it. I just go into counseling mode because I think that's the best way to add to other people's lives. This is probably a result of a lot of my socializing in my youth, to have been around counselors. Most positive social engagements came from that. So it seems as though much of what I can offer to people is someone who solves problems rather than someone who is fun to be around. I listen more than I speak, but this is sometimes results in conversations where I don't say much. In dating, this has resulted in either attracting people who show clear red flags or not being seen as potential mate, probably for being too passive. And then he gets on to explaining some family relationships and history, personal issues that he's had growing up in his family of origin. And we can skip that on down to, he summarizes it by saying he sees himself as having a troubled past, low self-esteem, a lack of relationships, fairly passive, trying to do something about it, but nothing seems to be coming out of it. I'm aware things like this come from within, and yes, it's hard. I'm aware lots of these missing pieces come from things that didn't happen that should have, or things that happened that shouldn't have. I'm looking into it. I just don't know where to go next. I do compare myself to what I aspire to be, and that's someone who is genuinely fun to be around, rather than just an asset. I sense I'm upholding this problem solver inside of me at all times. I respond with solving problems and helping people when people ask me what I want to do when I'm older. I don't want a conventional desk job. I want to truly help with technologies that we have and whatever tools are around us. When interacting with different people, there's something that's missing for me. Maybe the story I might be telling myself is, people don't want me there unless I help them. I'm aware of these things, but I don't know exactly what needs tweaking right now. Well, first of all, I can see that you have a lot of assets, a lot of positive attributes. I point those out because those are going to be key in your moving ahead in your life. I credit you, I laud you for realizing you want to have a better life, you want to have a different life, you want to have a life that you have in mind for yourself, whatever that is precisely. And I respect anyone who wants to do that, knows what they want, and is looking for answers. Now, I can't solve your problems and answer your questions for you, but I can give you some tips, some perspectives that you can look at, accept and give a try to, or reject them completely. But there are things that might help that I found that have helped other people. So now the last page, I wanted to point out a few things before we get into the few notes that I made to try to summarize a question, an answer. One, in the last part of the message, you say that you're aware that there are missing pieces, things that didn't happen that should have, or things that happened that shouldn't have. Of Dr. William Glasser, the late Dr. Glasser. He used to say with new clients that would come in, he would say, if you want to talk about your past, if you feel you need to, we could do that. Some. I am not really interested in spending a lot of time in the past. I'm more interested in the now. I'm more interested in what we're going to do at this point forward. Because that's what is, what exists. The solution lies in the present and the future, not the past. And so I caution you, sometimes therapists, and it sounds like you either have a family of therapists in your life, or you've gone to therapy before. When you say you have a lot of exposure to therapists, I'm not counselors, I'm not sure what you mean by that. But counselors can, because it seems so obvious and it seems it's easy, can spend a lot of time in the past. Many times when it comes to a client, if you get them talking about the past, quite frankly, it's possible to just sit back and just let them talk for a full 50 minutes. And while that has value to a point, I'm of the school who believes that, as Dr. Glasser, it has value to know where you've come from and maybe why you think the way you do. But the solution is now and in the future. So don't spend a lot of time worrying about what might have happened, what could have happened, what should have happened. Those are essentially irrelevant at this point. And I know that's a powerful, challenging statement to say, but someone who stays stuck in the past is not very fruitful at solving their current day problems. That's what I've observed, and so I just caution you on that. I respond with solving problems and helping people as far as what I want to do with my life. Now, as you know, you can solve problems and help people and serve your purpose in life either at your job by choosing a position as an engineer that would enable you to get paid, have a career, and fulfill your life purpose, life goals at the same time. Many people do that. Some people are not able to do that. So they have the job they feel they need for the money they feel they need, and they look for ways to help people with the skills and attributes they have in their off time, on their days off, on their weekends, on their vacations. So it can be done either way. You can either find a job in your career that allows you to combine both a career and a living and serving a purpose, or you can do them in two different ways. Go to your job and have this as a side issue, which a lot of people do. The other point that I wanted to mention was, you say that I think I might be telling myself that people don't want me there unless I help them. That's something we need to discuss, and we will here in just a second, because that's in your own mind. That's your own thinking. It's erroneous thinking, most likely, and so we want to address that so that your own thoughts don't drag you down as you try to move forward. One thing that stands out in your message is that you are obviously a highly analytical person. The fact that you're an engineer gives that away too. It makes sense that you would be a good fit, because you're a problem solver, as you say in several places. You like to look at things, dissect it, I assume, analyze it, and come up with a solution. I'm sure, although I'm not an engineer, I would think that that would serve you well in engineering, and that you would be a good engineer if you did that. If you approach life improvement, self-improvement, and relationships in that way, you won't be very successful. The reason is, and I can relate to that to some extent, because I have 4 college degrees, and I've been a computer programmer, data systems analyst. I'm also a certified public accountant, and have an MBA with a concentration in marketing. And marketing, as you may know, deals heavily in statistical research, marketing research. And so algebra and correlation analysis and so forth, those serve certain careers and certain endeavors well. Computer programming is logic, it's algebra, it's discrete, it's binary. But when we get into affairs of the human heart, and now we're moving into the relationships, you have to set that aside, because what I found with affairs of the heart, things don't always appear rational. Things don't always appear logical. Look at the number 6. If the number 6 were written on the sidewalk, great big numeral, and you were standing on one end of that 6, it would obviously be a 6. Now picture someone standing on the other end of the sidewalk looking at it. It looks like a 9. Both people can look at it and say it's obviously a 9. And you would say, well, it's obviously a 6. Are you blind? Well, who's right? Who's wrong? And in affairs of the heart, in emotions, You can't apply algebra and calculus to it. So it takes a new set of skills. And how do we develop those? Well, first of all, by being aware that we can't just approach a fellow human being from a logical standpoint. That it's different. And we set our mathematical, analytical self aside and we listen. Listening is the most important thing we can do to another human being. It conveys dignity, respect, and we have to look at it when someone is talking to us, when someone is communicating to us, they're broadcasting who they are as a person. They're revealing themselves to you. It's actually quite a gift when you think about it. And the hardest thing for most people is to listen. Our world is filled with people who don't listen very well because we're mainly interested in what we have to say next. And so even though we're nodding our head, we're thinking of something else. And we miss a lot of the nuances in what a person is communicating to us. It's not only listening to the words, but it's looking at their body language, their face, without staring and making them uncomfortable. It's about listening to their tone of voice. It's about everything in context. They're sharing something very important about themselves, probably more than they're aware of. And it's such a precious thing. But we have to lay the analytical self aside, the binary, the logical side aside, and listen to what's being said. And that's where the beginning of building relationships starts. It also starts by showing an interest in what the other person is saying. People like to talk about themselves. We all do. We know ourselves better than anyone else, and we matter to ourselves. We like to communicate about ourselves. And if someone asks us questions about ourselves and shows an interest in what we're interested in, or just ask us about things, we end up thinking that it was a delightful person to talk to. Even though you may try to be a good listener and draw someone out, and in that process you're barely saying anything, but you're asking questions to draw that other person out. You're taking an interest in what they're doing. You could have them leave a conversation with you where you said very little, and they would say, "We had a very nice talk." When you really didn't, you'll think, "I don't know if I said much." But you listened, you cared. That's where relationships are built. And take the pressure off. Don't feel that if you sit down with somebody, there's some kind of a project status thing. There are two kinds of things I've learned in comparing psychology with business management. Business management tends to be more what we call project status. You got a problem? What are the possibilities? What's the pros? What's the cons? What's the timeline? What are our resources? What are our assets? Let's make a decision. Now how are we going to implement this? And when are we going to have this accomplished? That's project status oriented. In counseling and in affairs of the heart, it's more process oriented. The end result by tomorrow noon is not so important. It's the process, it's the listening, it's the development, it's the evolution of a relationship. And, who knows how long that will take. That's a process. We focus on the process, not having a decision or wrapping this up by Friday type of thing. So it's a different hat, if you will. So that's an important thing about relationships. Just to be easy, enjoy every relationship that you have. And where the relationship ends up, let it happen on its own. And I think you'll be very surprised at the results. As far as being fun to be around, I think was another point that you had, which I think a lot of people might have questions about. It starts with not taking things so seriously. And it also starts by being on the lookout for things that are funny, being on the lookout for things that have a humorous point of view to it. And I can give you an example of a very famous author by the name of Ram Dass, who just died lately, was part of a foundation called the Siva Foundation, along with a person who calls himself Wavy Gravy. Now you can guess by that name that he was a clown, and he enjoyed using humor and clown routines to make serious points. When this Siva Foundation met to do great things around the globe, and one of their main projects was cataract surgeries in underdeveloped countries. If you can imagine the fundraising, gathering professionals to do it, making arrangements in different countries. There's a lot of logistics involved to it, and a very, very important undertaking. But Wavy Gravy was on the charter foundation, and he would come to a meeting, Ram Dass said, and he would say, "No one here is allowed to use the word serious, and if you do, you have to put money in this jar." And they would laugh and joke, and they would travel throughout the world making their plans and meeting with people to make arrangements for surgeries. And Wavy Gravy always tried to push the group to laugh, look for the humor, look for the fun, to joke. And it wasn't because he was uncaring. He's very dedicated, very committed, and doing a very great service for thousands and thousands of people throughout the world. But my point is, you can have a foundation, you can have a group of people who are very, very committed to doing something very important and very necessary, and still find ways to laugh. Their situations that they were looking at were grim, but they still could laugh while they were doing it. And how do you do that? You keep on the lookout for funny things. You keep on the lookout for humorous things. And the other thing that I always say about humor, be very careful when you use humor to make sure that everybody laughs. Don't use sarcasm and sarcastic statements. If you have to make a joke at someone else's expense, it's not funny, it's hostile, it's an aggressive act, it's out of anger. So if it isn't something where everyone can honestly laugh, then it's really not funny. So be on the lookout for good fun, for good jokes, that where everyone can laugh and it's harmless. It doesn't mean to hurt anyone or embarrass anyone or tear someone down. And you'll find that people enjoy that. People like that lighthearted sense of humor. And how do you develop it? Again, your question. Be on the lookout for it. It's all around you. Funny things can happen all around you. And but it's like I bought a Jeep once. And the funny thing about the Jeep Wrangler was I noticed after I bought the Jeep, I never knew there were so many Jeeps on the road. The minute I bought a Jeep, I started to notice every other Jeep on the road. And if you buy a Ford Mustang convertible, all of a sudden you say, I never realized there were so many of them on the road. Why? Because we're looking for them. They come into our awareness and we notice it right away. Humor is the same way. So be on the lookout for it and just take it easy. If you look for fun in enjoyable ways, not meaning to hurt anyone, there's little risk involved in it. Because you're not trying to offend anybody or you're not meaning to hurt anyone. And so humor comes easier, but you have to look for it. The other thing that I noticed in your your message was that it seemed as though you're confusing self-confidence and self-esteem. Self-confidence is more action-oriented. It's something like competence. It's if we practice on the piano, we develop a confidence that we can play the piano, or we develop a competence that we can play the piano to some degree. Or if we work on our car, we become confident that we can figure out how to fix our car. You as an engineer, or if you were asked to construct, say, a bridge, if that's your area of specialty, your training, even if you'd never built a bridge before, you are confident you could figure out, I'm sure, how to build a bridge. If that was your project, you can figure it out. You can find out the information you need. That's more functional, more task-oriented, having faith that you can find the answers, you can figure it out, you can get questions answered. Self-esteem is not functional like that. Self-esteem is, as Dr. Wayne Dyer, another famous psychologist, he would say, it's an inside job. Self-esteem can't be obtained by learning how to do something, or by weightlifting so much, or taking a college course, or taking a seminar or something like that. They might help. But self-esteem is an inside job. It's loving yourself, accepting yourself. It's having peace. It's having faith in yourself that you're fine just the way you are. Just the way you are. And it doesn't have anything to do with anything you've done, or anything you've said. So self-esteem, I sense in your message that you've tried many different things and they haven't raised your self-esteem. That's because you can't raise your self-esteem by doing something. You already have it. You just have to accept that inside yourself, you're perfect just the way you are. You're perfect just the way you are. And you're loved, and you are loved, and you're at peace just the way you are. The reason you may not feel that is because of the garbage that's in between. But it's still there. It never went anywhere. You had it the minute you were born, and it's still there. All you have to do is just to work on accepting that you're fine and great and wonderful and lovable just the way you are. That's self-esteem. And it isn't something you can get confidence by weightlifting or playing a musical instrument or something, but not self-esteem. So work on that. Just work on, and I'm going to give you some references here in a moment that might be helpful to do that, but work on accepting yourself just the way you are and have peace. And as far as focusing on what you want, again, it's not quantifiable. You have to lay the calculus aside and the analytical part of you. If you want to focus on what you want for your life, one helpful way is to use your imagination. It's completely abstract. Use your imagination. If you want to be more fun to be around, well, precisely what would that be? What will you be doing for you to be fun to be around the way you want? What is comfortable for you? What do you want to do? What will the other person be doing? What will you be doing? What will you be saying? Where will you be? Be as specific as possible. And then act that way. Go out and act that way. It's the same with building relationships. Imagine what the relationship would be. What will you be doing? How will you be acting? And then act that way. And if you say, well, I don't know how it's going to end up though. I don't know exactly what. Worry about this one moment and the next moment. It's like taking a trip across country from New York to Los Angeles. And let's say you're doing it in the dark. So with your headlights on, the only thing you can see are the next 100 or 200 yards. That's it. So you focus on that 100 or 200 yards. You're going to end up going thousands of miles when you're done. But you don't know what's going to happen in Oklahoma or Iowa or Missouri, whatever route you choose to take. You practice focusing on the 100 or 200 yards you can see, and you take one step at a time. And your trip will unfold. And that's the way you want to look at approaching relationships. Take it easy. Focus on the very short term. Don't rush it. Don't say, I have to accomplish something by Friday or tomorrow at noon. I have to know how this relationship is going to work out by Wednesday. You're dealing with the process-oriented affairs of the heart. Focus on where you want to go, what you want to do, and on the next 100 yards or so. Now, I have 3 books that I'd like to recommend to you. I don't get a commission for selling books. I review books on my website, thegreatlovestoryofyourlife.com. And these are a few that I've reviewed that I think you might find helpful. One is by the late Dr. Richard Carlson. And he does a very good job for those who don't have a lot of money to spend on counseling or have the time to spend on counseling. He is very good at giving you the bottom line, the nuts and bolts of how to make good life change in your life without having to spend all that money and do all of the unnecessary work that sometimes we think of as being required for self-improvement. Very good book, and written in very simple language, very down to earth, and I highly recommend it. I do a book review of it on my website. Now, another one that I've done a book review on, this is by, again, a very famous author, Mr. Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And he focuses on, this book has sold millions of copies, he focuses on the importance, on the power of this present moment, which is a big thing for me too. I'm a big believer in our being aware of how much power we have in this present moment to make changes in our life. Because that's where all of our power really is. And I encourage anyone to read this book for looking for ways to become the person they want to be and learn more about themselves and how to effect change. One last book, and I do get compensated for this book. It's the book that I've written, thegreatlovestoryofyourlife.com. Learning to love yourself and others and find purpose. I bring it up today because it speaks to exactly what the issues are in this particular discussion. It's about learning to accept ourselves and love ourselves and learning to accept others and taking them as they are, taking things as they are and going from there, figuring out what we want for our lives and then how to go about accomplishing the things we want in life. So take a look at those 3 books. Again, this video can apply to anyone that has questions in these areas. Young man, I wish you all the best. You have a lot of resources, as I've said, and a lot of capabilities. I know you're going to do just fine. And if you're so inclined, I'd like to know later how you're doing. And I wish you all the best.